Hi everybody, it's Eden Maybot of Light Cycle Astrology. Welcome back to the channel, friends. I hope you had a great weekend. Today we are getting into Venus moving into the sign of Pisces, the sign of Venus's exaltation. So we're going to get into the meaning of that. Before we do, let's pull her up on the real-time clock and get a look at this. So there we see Venus at 00 degrees of Pisces. For me, it's going to be around 4:33 p.m. All the way in Hawaii here. So that's quite early, but if you're on the East Coast, it's going to be around 9:33 p.m. And I believe on the West Coast, that's going to be 6:33 p.m. So late on Thursday, there we see Venus has just moved into Pisces. Now, just ignore the houses here because this is set to my local time here in Hawaii. Now, excuse my groggy voice today, you guys. The volcano here on the Big Island has been putting tremendous amounts of smoke into the air over the evening every night. And we wake up, and before the trade winds have a chance to come through and blow away all the smoke, sometimes I wake up very groggy. So excuse my voice. Last night, I came home with my wife. We were unloading the car, and I just happened to look over my shoulder and see Venus shining brightly in the western sky. The sun had just gone down, so it was twilight, but the sky was dark enough where I could see beautiful, bright Venus. And I also noticed that Saturn was slightly below her, about a hand width or so apart. So you can see this right now in the western sky. If you are lucky enough to have clear weather and maybe aren't near too much light pollution, she's pretty bright. And if you get really, really clear skies and not very much light pollution, you'll also be able to see Saturn right below her. So that's a really nice experience to connect with the goddess in person visually, rather than just always seeing it on a screen or on a program or whatnot. That was a really neat experience that I had, which is very Venusian just in general, which is sort of getting into the overall meaning of Venus as she is representing an archetype of pleasure, enjoyment, beauty, things that are sensual or sexual. These are all Venusian experiences that we have, and that's what the planet herself represents in the sky. But what does it mean that she enters the sign of her exaltation? Well, let's get into that. Let me go ahead and pull up my notes so you guys can see some of the things that I have here. So first of all, Venus in Pisces was a sign that was an exaltation sign for her. What does that mean exactly? Well, each planet in the ancient world had a sign that it belonged to in terms of being exalted or depressed. Now that, if you're not familiar with that, it was like a parallel domicile rulership scheme almost, you could say, or maybe like an alternative one. It comes out of the ancient Babylonian astrological tradition. But what was happening was there were almost like two systems at once. There was the system that is said to be the domicile rulership system, where each planet, for instance, Venus was said to have a home in the sign of Taurus and also a home in Libra. So that's one feminine home in Taurus and then a masculine home in Libra. Each planet had two domicile places, except for the sun and the moon, who each had one house that they belonged to. And that was a place where whenever that planet was said to be home, that they did not have to be filtering their natural energies through another planet's energy. So for instance, if Venus is in a Mars-ruled sign like Aries, Venus has to do or work with Mars-like things, which she doesn't obviously want to do. So when Venus is in Taurus or Libra, it's as if she is completely unfiltered and in a natural, pure expression of herself, where she can just easily express Venus kinds of things or qualities. There was the exaltation and depression scheme that was sort of an alternative rulership scheme, or at least a parallel one that was also happening. And the Hellenistic astrologers basically merged both of these schemes together to give a sense of the way a planet would behave depending on where it was in the zodiac. So when a planet goes through an exaltation sign, it was said to be, some people thought, or some astrologers thought, that it was actually better than being in a domicile sign. So this might even be better than Venus in Taurus or in Libra. And there was this quality where a planet in the exaltation place was said to be lifted up to extol its virtues in almost like a high celebrated quality. And some of the things that I pulled from the ancient authors here, we have Firmicus Maternus wrote, "They are elevated by a certain natural sublimity of magnitude." Another thing that he wrote was, "Denoted this insignia of the greatest good fortune." Okay, so Venus is one of the two benefic planets that we use in ancient astrology. So not only do you have a planet that is already naturally signifying things that are benefic, sometimes this can mean things that we don't often associate with Venus, like having material good fortune come to us, rather than just thinking, okay, she's about beauty and love or relationships or whatnot, which she is, but also that she could just be about something generally fortunate that happens to us in a good way, like feeling good, feeling beautiful, feeling social, having some social charisma that just seems to, we all have those moments where for some reason socially we just feel like we're clicking among other people, feeling good, feeling great when we wake up in the morning. Or sometimes she could represent something good materially that happens to us, like getting a raise or finding some money or having somebody help you out in a monetary way or give you something beautiful, finding gold, anything like that, receiving a gift. Anything like that could be within the realm of Venus. So having a planet that is already denoting good fortune move into her fortunate exaltation sign is a really, really good thing. Another thing that Firmicus Maternus wrote was, when the stars are in those very degrees. Okay, so not only did each planet have a sign that was said to be its exaltation place where it was lifted up, but it also, within the sign, there was a certain degree that was even an exaltation degree of power. And for Venus in Pisces, that is going to be the 27th degree of Pisces. So we'll have to watch for that as Venus moves through this sign and see if you notice anything particularly pleasurable or fun or awesome as Venus moves through that specific degree. But anyway, when the stars are in those very degrees, specifically Pisces in the 27th degree, in which they are exalted, namely in the favorable houses of a nativity, meaning the 1st, 11th, 10th, I guess it would be the 4th or the 5th, potentially the 7th or the 3rd. So not only is Venus in Pisces in the 27th degree and in a favorable house, he's saying they make happy, illustrious, remarkable, powerful, fortunate, and wealthy person. So it's a very, very good thing. Firmicus goes on to say that an exalted planet is better positioned in the sign of its exaltation than one of its own domiciles, Taurus or Libra, following the wisdom of the Babylonians. Another ancient astrologer, Antiochus, explains, "We say that it is because Hermes is the master of arguments, while Aphrodite is the overseer of desire and intercourse, both social and sexual. Then, at the place where the intellectual increases in the sign of Virgo, there the desire and the pleasurable in intercourse is depressed." So we're talking about the opposite sign of Pisces in Virgo. Venus going through Virgo is going to be depressed. And where the appetite And pleasurable is exalted. There, the intellectual is depressed. So this is a theme that the ancient astrologers get into when they talk about exaltations and depressions. Another ancient astrologer, Rhetorius the Egyptian, said, "For what reason is Venus exalted here," meaning in Pisces, "Mercury in its fall there, and Mercury exalted here," meaning in Virgo, "and Venus in its fall there? We say that Mercury is the lord of words, but Venus is the ruler of desire and sex. Here, then, does the rationale increase," meaning in Virgo. "There is desire and the enjoyment of sex in its fall," meaning still in Virgo. "And here is longing and pleasurable exalted in Pisces. There is logic in its fall." So these are not, I don't want you guys to get the wrong idea. These are not, if you have Venus in Virgo, that means you won't enjoy sex. Of course you will, but it goes to this quality where, for instance, sometimes if you're too much in your head, it's hard to be sensual, especially in the bedroom. You've seen those movies where people sometimes say, "Just shut up and kiss me," or "Stop talking" when the guy's nervous, something like that. That's what this is getting at. Or it's also true that if you're really in your body, if you're dancing, you're not really intellectually zoned in your head. There is an interesting YouTuber that I have seen before. I think it's the Fearless Male is the channel name, and I've talked about this before on the channel. But Brian, I think his name is Brian. He actually he's helping people learn how to date, if they're trying to get back into the dating world. And he actually hires models, women, to stand on a stage, and he's there on the stage, and then there's a whole seminar of men out in the audience, and he'll call on men to come up to the stage, and he wants to see how they would approach the woman in the wild, so to speak, right, at a bar. And they go through a series of questions where Brian will ask the model. He'll say, "Well, what did you feel when, Sean or whoever, came up and approached you?" Now, usually the men are quite nervous, as you can imagine. And a lot of times the woman will say, "Well, it felt like he was nervous. He was all in his head. He didn't feel like he was centered in his own body. And I just wanted to get out of the situation." So Brian will have the guy that's on stage. He'll do it over and over again, and he'll suggest to him, try to get out of your head, try to get into your body, try to feel what you're feeling when you approach a woman, because women are very in tune with their bodies and their hearts. And so it doesn't feel good or natural if you're too much in your head and you're nervous and you're bringing all this nervous energy. People can feel that, what is it? 90% of all human relation is not based on what you say or the words that you're speaking. It's based on that sub communication of emotions or feelings. So he's trying to encourage men to get better at being more in tune, more grounded within their body, not so worried or nervous about what they're saying. This is a lot like that. I think that really gets at the heart of this. If you're talking about Venus in the sign of Pisces, you are talking about being in the body. Okay, you're feeling something. You're in tune with your senses. Exaltations are tied to the seasonal qualities like heat, cold, light, darkness, dry, moist, etc. So these are senses that we're feeling, right? Is it cold? Is it hot? Or is it dark? Is it dry? Is it moist? While domicile rulerships are more a competing or alternative scheme of rulership tied to the alternation of light and dark of the seasons on a more metaphysical level. My own thoughts there. A little bit of the difference between the domicile rulership and the exaltation scheme is that they're somewhat both tied into the seasons. For instance, in the sign of Pisces, what is happening with the light at that time of the year is that the light is increasing day by day. It's getting very, very close to the spring equinox. So at the time of the spring equinox, light is said to be overcoming the dark half of the year because we're entering a time where there's equal hours of light to equal hours of darkness. But then thereafter, there becomes more hours of daylight in a 24-hour period than darkness. So for 6 months of the year, there are more hours of darkness. For 6 months of the year, there are more hours of daylight. And the spring equinox is that threshold where it shifts out of the dark half of the year into the light half of the year. Pisces is the pre-spring sign that does that. So that gives a lot of the metaphysical characteristics of the sign when we're talking about light and dark and how does that affect us. And it is tied into the season, but it's more about a sense of the light representing the future that is bright, the future that is, anticipating something new, whereas the darkness represents the cold darkness that we sort of want to get away from. Now, during Pisces time or season, there's a mixture of winter and a mixture of spring that comes in there. There's this anticipation that we are looking ahead. We are anticipating the return of warmth, the return of light, the return of that sensual quality of spring where animals are mating, grass is growing vibrantly, spring flowers are blooming. There is a very sensual quality about the spring. And as Pisces is the month right before the spring equinox, that is sort of driving us down into our senses. So I think that what this is all getting at is the opposite of that in Virgo. We're going into the winter. So for me, in my mind, it's almost like, why is Virgo so intellectual and Pisces so somatic and sensual? I think that in Virgo, what you really have is it's as if the mind is needed to get through the dark half of the year. We need our wits about us to have the food available. If you're in a cold weather climate, the food isn't going to grow. Things are going to die. So it's as if you really need the sensual experience. Plus, you're not concerned with mating and producing offspring, right? Because you're going into a time of year that isn't, good for having new babies because it's winter. Things aren't growing. So you naturally want to have new life come about when things are going towards heat and light and things increasing like that. So we see these natural correspondences with the seasons, and you see on one half of the year, we're going towards the return or exaltation of life. And that drives us naturally into our senses. We're going more into those sensual feelings of pleasure or sexuality in the time of Pisces. And that is what you get that is different from Virgo, where it seems like you need to be thinking more rationally at the time of Virgo season. So Pisces, as a pre-springtime part of the year, connects our body and hearts in anticipation to the coming warmth, bringing all manner of lust and desire naturally into focus at that time. Venus as a symbolic repository for all manner of experiences having to do with desire, lust, pleasure, as such, is seen to be most important. Another way of saying exalted, which means lifted up on high in the sign of Pisces. How the ancient astrologers described exaltation. Firmicus associated exaltation with positions of authority, the ability to exercise power. They are entrusted with kingly works, dwell with them, and enjoy the profits therefrom. Brennan on Dorotheus has that in his book. The Michigan Papyrus author referred to exaltation as thrones and depressions, the opposite sign, as prisons. Modern astrologers practicing ancient astrology, such as Demetra George, describe exaltation as planetary energies that are celebrated or lifted up. Adam Ellenbos describes exaltations as intensified with a sense of power, strength, importance, support, signifying a starting point that is favorable, blessed, lucky, fortunate, raised up from a lowly condition to a great height, but possibly indicative of inflated hubris. Adam also says that in the house system, the exaltation lord signifies some allotment of fortune or circumstance related to the topics of that house. I hope that gives you a sense of the meaning of Venus in the sign of Pisces in her exaltation place. Now what I want to do is something fun. I want to bring up some famous people that have Venus natally in their birth chart in this position. Okay, so first of all, the list was so big that I had to pare it down by, like, there were so many people. It was amazing. I think that speaks to the characteristic of natives who have Venus in Pisces, where Venus is a planet that represents beauty, and everybody loves beautiful things, either beautiful people or beautiful qualities within people. So I think that that gives you a sense of, if you're lucky enough to have Venus natally in Pisces, there's something very beautiful about you that other people are going to be naturally attracted to. And even if you're not famous, I think that I would bet that you have quite a large social group, and there are a lot of people that enjoy being around you, or there's something that they enjoy about you and love very much. Also, this is going to propel people, I think, naturally to want to be more social. So we see a lot of famous people with this natally. If you type that into Google, just famous people with Venus in Pisces, the list is huge. So I don't have everybody on the list now. But some of my favorites: Zooey Deschanel, Venus in the third house of siblings. She was named after a character in a J.D. Salinger novel. This connection with the third house to writers is interesting because she gets her namesake from a character in a book. Has a famous older sister. The third house associated with siblings, and Venus specifically associated with sisters. She met future stars Jake Gyllenhaal, I hope I pronounced that right, and Kate Hudson. Kate Hudson also has Venus in Pisces in her birth chart. Very interesting. So she's meeting famous people while attending the Crossroads School, another third house place. Okay, Kate Hudson, Venus in the ninth house, became a star after her role in Almost Famous. That title, just in and of itself, is a very ninth house kind of title. That's because the 10th house is a place where we see fame. And as the ninth house is a house that falls away from the 10th, it's often associated with a decline of fame. So you have this title that is Almost Famous. Very interesting. Now, how do we get this ninth house connection? Well, she was raised Jewish, but practiced Buddhism like her mother. She was accepted to New York University, but chose to pursue an acting career instead of an undergraduate degree. So this is very interesting. Ninth house is associated with higher education. But what kind of education was it? Well, she got accepted into a more intellectual kind of program at a more, standard intellectual kind of university, New York University. But instead, she chose to do something artistic, right? Very interesting, acting. So she still had that ninth house connection, but you could see that even over certain ninth house opportunities, she went with that artistic one. Okay, now, other ninth house things are that she was quoted as saying, meditation has been the most helpful and life-changing thing for me. So she is a big advocate for spirituality and meditation, a ninth house characteristic. Drew Barrymore, Venus in the 10th house, co-present with Jupiter and the Sun. Wow. She not only has Jupiter, who is in his own temple in the sign of Pisces, but she also has a Pisces Sun and Venus, and this is all in the 10th. 10th house is associated with fame, but she has the domicile ruler and the exaltation ruler and the sun in that 10th house. So obviously Drew Barrymore is extraordinarily famous. And one of the things that she is famous for is being very soft and gentle and having that very sensual kind of beauty to her. Kourtney Kardashian has Venus in the first. One thing that's interesting is that what made her super famous was her sister's sex tape after it was leaked, which catalyzed interest in the Keeping Up with the Kardashians series. So you have Venus representing sisters in the first house. What did it do? Well, it made her personally stand out as a famous person of beauty. So I thought that was also interesting. Hugh Hefner, Venus in the seventh house. What is this man famous for? He is famous for his Playboy bunnies, right? His not necessarily his marriage partner, because I don't think he really marries women, but he has partners that are extremely exalted in terms of beauty, right? They're Playboy bunnies. And he is also a legal advocate for freedom, right? Because he was involved, he was, what would you call it? He broke the inroads into pornographic magazines as a business. He naturally had to go through a lot of legal struggle with that. Another signification of the seventh house. And he's also famous for having never-ending bachelor kinds of sex parties at his mansion, right? So all seventh house things, parties, legal things, partners or relationships or sex. Okay, John Travolta, another Venus in the ninth house. So he belongs to the Church of Scientology. So we see this religion. And one of the things that was interesting is he was reported to fly his own plane to bring aid relief to Haiti for the earthquake there. And he also carried members of the Church of Scientology with him. They were on board with him. So interesting. You have the ninth house associated with travel. You have it associated with religion. And he did both at the same time. Very interesting. Justin Bieber, we have Venus in the fifth house of creativity and entertainment. I don't think we even need to say anything more about that. Obviously, Venus in this creative house as a singer and entertainer is very much fitting the profile. Okay, and lastly, we have Penelope Cruz, Venus in the 12th house of healing and hidden things. One of the things that she said was, as a child, she was doing ballet, and she felt that this really gave her the discipline that she needed later on to pursue her career as an actress, right? So a very 12th house kind of thing, that discipline, right? That almost solitude. You can imagine that she's having to spend a lot of time dancing, in the studio or wherever. In Spain where she grew up, but it was a place of solitude, but it wasn't a bad place like a prison or a hospital like we might normally associate with the 12th house. We see it as something that's kind of good or beneficent, but nonetheless, it had that sense of solitude because she is working on ballet, which is very difficult. Also, she said that she spent long hours at her grandmother's apartment as a child. That connection to Saturn having his joy in the 12th and Saturn relating to grandparents. She also worked with Mother Teresa, which I found fascinating. And this included her going to assist her in leprosy clinics. She also photographed orphan gangbanger children in India. Get all of this 12th house kind of connotations, right? Gangbangers. The 12th house is often associated with people that are involved in crime. Orphans, another Saturnine kind of quality. So you get the sense of this Saturnine kind of quality, but they're all fortunate things, right? She's helping Mother Teresa. She's photographing and being very, very touched by these 12th house experiences with gangbanger or orphan children. Okay, so now the last thing, what about the secrecy of the 12th house? Cruz dated Cruz for 2 years, and there is a kind of secrecy surrounding their relationship, at least as far as I could determine when looking these things up, especially in their relationship, their separation, and the connection they both have to Scientology, which she's defended Tom Cruise in among the years. So that there was a little bit, for me, it felt like they were very, very private or secret about their relationship and the connection it had to Scientology. So those are some of the famous people. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I hope you have a great week, and I'll be back again with another astrology video soon. And as Venus gets closer to moving into the sign of Pisces later on in the week, we'll probably go ahead and do a rising sign video to see how this lands in your personal birth chart, so we get a sense of what topically this could represent for Venus having some good fortune. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe on the video if you haven't already, and leave a comment in the comment section about how you think Venus is going to go for you. Okay, take care, everybody. Bye.